rain tapping against cracked pavement. An old man sits alone on a wooden bench, his coat too thin for the cold. His hands tremble, not from age, from memory. He unfolds a faded photograph. Edges curled, colors drained by time, medals, a uniform, a young face frozen in black and white. That boy once carried a rifle across burning deserts, once slept in flooded trenches, once dragged wounded brothers through jungle mud while bullets tore the air apart. He fought for freedom, but freedom never paid him back. Imagine risking your life in the deadliest war in human history, only to come home with nothing. No salary, no pension, no parade, just silence. During World War II, millions of African soldiers marched beneath British and French flags. They crossed North African sands where the heat melted boots. They stormed Italian hillsides under artillery fire. They pushed through Burmese jungles where malaria killed faster than enemy bullets. They were cooks, porters, riflemen, scouts. They were essential, and they helped defeat Hitler. That's the part history likes to mention. What it doesn't tell you is what happened next. Ships carried them home, not to medals and gratitude, but to broken promises. Back in their villages, they waited for pay that never arrived. They lined up at colonial offices. They filled out forms they couldn't read. They were told to come back tomorrow. Tomorrow became next month. Next month became next year, then decades. Their wages were lost, their service records misplaced, their names missing from the files. Not by accident, by design. Colonial governments quietly rewrote the rules. European soldiers received pensions. African soldiers received excuses. Some were offered a few coins, a fraction of what white troops earned. Others got nothing at all. No health care. No veterans' benefits. No acknowledgement, just a polite smile and a closed door. And so they aged in poverty. Heroes turned farmers. War survivors turned street vendors. Decorated veterans begging outside train stations. Men who had stared down Nazi machine guns now counting spare change. Listen closely. You can almost hear it. The echo of boots on parade grounds. The crack of distant artillery. Then the sound of files being stamped and shelved. Forgotten. Their story wasn't erased by time. It was erased by paperwork, by politics, by deliberate forgetting. For decades, their sacrifice stayed buried in archives and footnotes, until families began asking questions, until historians followed the money. Until dusty records revealed a simple, brutal truth: they won the war. But they never got the pay, and that brings us here, to this old man, this photograph, these shaking hands. Because the real mystery isn't what they did on the battlefield. Africa, the 1930s, morning light spilling over dusty colonial streets, European governors in pressed uniforms. Local people moving quietly past them like shadows in their own land. France and Britain ruled everything you could see. And then war erupted in Europe. The radios crackled. Newspapers screamed headlines. And suddenly Africa wasn't just a colony anymore. It was a reservoir of bodies. They didn't simply ask for help, they took it. Young men were summoned to government offices, some persuaded with promises, some dragged away by force. Posters appeared on village walls, smiling soldiers, clean uniforms, bright futures. Officers spoke of honor. Village chiefs repeated orders handed down from above. They were promised steady wages, food for their families, a life waiting for them after the war. For many, signing up meant survival. For others, it was duty. And for some, there was no choice at all. They left farms behind, left mothers standing in doorways, left newborn children who would grow up without knowing their fathers. From Senegal to Kenya, Nigeria to Ghana, more than 1 million African troops were mobilized. That number alone should stop you cold. 1 million lives pulled from fields, workshops, fishing boats. They were herded into training camps run by foreign officers. Shouted at in languages they didn't speak, taught to march in borrowed boots. Their rifles were old, their uniforms second-hand. Their pay already lower than white soldiers before a single shot was fired. They noticed, but they swallowed it, because refusing wasn't an option. Picture the trains leaving the stations. Steam rising, hands waving through windows, mothers pressing prayers into their sons' palms. Some men had never traveled beyond the next village. Now they were being shipped across oceans. Listen closely. You can almost hear the rhythm of marching feet, the metallic clatter of equipment, the quiet fear hiding behind brave faces. They were told they were defending civilization. But back home, they didn't even have basic rights. They were called soldiers, but treated like tools. Still, they went. Because something bigger was coming, something dark. A war that would swallow continents. And standing there on the decks of crowded ships, staring at disappearing coastlines, none of them could know the truth. That this decision, this moment, would cost them years of their lives. Some would never return. And those who did, they were about to discover that the real battle hadn't even started yet. Because when the guns finally roared, something in Africa was about to break, and the world would never put it back together the same way. A group of young men step off a ship onto frozen European soil. Their boots crunch into snow for the first time in their lives. They breathe out, white mist. Their eyes scan cities reduced to skeletons, brick dust in the air, church towers snapped in half, streets echoing with distant explosions. These are farmers, fishermen, students. Now they are soldiers. They fight in Italy, in Burma, in North Africa. They advance through olive groves shredded by machine gun fire. They crawl through rice paddies under mortar blasts. They march across deserts where the sun cooks men alive. And when commanders hesitate, they send the Africans first. Minefields, cleared by bare hands and bayonets, ammunition crates. Carried across open ground while bullets stitch the dirt around their feet. Fortified hills, stormed uphill as artillery screams overhead and the sky turns orange. Listen, the thunder of guns. The whistle of incoming shells, the short, sharp prayers whispered in mother tongues. French tirailleurs, British King's African rifles, names written in official reports, blood written into the soil. They fight with a ferocity born from having nothing to lose. And slowly, quietly, respect begins to grow. Some officers admit it in low voices, away from headquarters. These men saved our lives. A white commander grips a wounded African soldier's hand. A medic works frantically under fire. A platoon survives because a scout from Ghana spotted an ambush in time. Wow moment, they weren't just helping, they were carrying the war. Letters are written by candlelight, folded carefully, passed through military hands. They speak of victory coming soon. Of wages waiting back home, of mothers who will finally live comfortably. They write about returning as heroes, they believe it. But while these men bleed on foreign ground, something colder is happening thousands of miles away. Behind polished desks in Paris and London, officials open ledgers. They sharpen pencils. They start calculating. How many African soldiers are there? How much will their pensions cost? What happens if we simply don't pay? Files are marked, budgets adjusted, promises quietly downgraded. No speeches, no announcements, just decisions. And in muddy trenches, the soldiers feel none of it. They keep fighting, they keep advancing, they keep dying. One man pulls a wounded friend from a crater as bullets snap overhead. Another charges a bunker after watching his brother fall. A third stands guard through the night, whispering prayers into the dark. Loyalty, sacrifice, absolute faith in a system that is already abandoning them. That's the punch in the gut. They think they're earning a future, but somewhere far away, their worth is being reduced to numbers on a page. Snow falls on a battlefield in Italy. Shells tear the air. Men shout over the roar of artillery. And in the middle of it all, African soldiers shoulder rifles alongside white comrades, but not as equals. They live in separate barracks. Eat from different mess tables. Receive smaller rations, lower pay. Watch as white soldiers climb ranks faster, handed promotions on silver platters. Yet they march, they fight, they survive. Because retreat would mean shame. Because brothers depend on them. Because survival demands obedience, no matter the injustice. They storm fortified hills. They crawl through mud under machine gun fire. They carry wounded comrades on their backs. Every step, every heartbeat, a silent act of defiance. And then whispers begin. Delayed payments. Confusing paperwork, promises that stretch into the endless horizon. Some men question their officers. Some are told calmly, wait until the war ends. Wait, as if victory would fix everything. Letters home speak of hope. Families clinging to the idea of a better life. Dreams of wages, pensions, recognition. But back in Europe, the math is already being done. How much would it cost to pay them? How much can be avoided? The real war is waiting, not in the mud or the snow, but in ledger books and offices. And when the guns finally fall silent, the world they believed they were saving will turn its back. The medals they earned won't guarantee a pension. The promises they trusted won't fill their pockets. The gratitude they deserved will be rewritten as paperwork. And in that moment of supposed victory, they will realize the second war, the one behind closed doors, is only just beginning. Because the fight for justice, for recognition, for what is owed, is a war far harder than any battlefield. Snow crunches under boots on a frozen European field. Artillery screams overhead. Men shout. Bullets tear the air. And in the middle of it, African soldiers fight side by side with white comrades, but never as equals, separate barracks, inferior rations, lower pay. White soldiers climbing ranks while they remain in the shadows. Yet they march, they fight, they survive, because retreat isn't an option, because brothers' lives depend on them. Because survival demands obedience, even in a world that treats them as less. They storm fortified hills. They crawl through mud under machine gun fire. They carry wounded friends on their backs. Every step a silent protest. Then whispers begin, delayed payments, confusing forms, promises that stretch into infinity. Some soldiers question their officers. Some are told, wait until the war ends. Wait, as if victory could erase injustice. Letters are written in candlelight, families dreaming of promised wages, hopes of recognition. Dreams of returning as heroes. But behind polished desks in Paris and London, officials tally costs. How much to pay, how much can be avoided. The second war begins, not with guns, not with bombs, but in ledgers, in offices, in policies designed to cheat the men who risked everything. And when the guns finally fall silent, no medals, no pensions, no promises fulfilled. Just the cold realization that courage alone cannot buy justice. The battlefield has ended. The fight for survival continues. Men who survived bullets, bombs, and frozen battlefields, now staring at paperwork. Letters, forms, official stamps, not orders to fight, not medals, but documents that quietly stripped them of everything they earned. It wasn't an accident. Decades later, researchers would uncover the truth. Archived files, hidden memos, cold calculations laid bare. European governments had a plan. Contracts were rewritten. Wages converted into colonial currency at unfair rates. Pensions quietly canceled. Funds siphoned off to rebuild cities they had never set foot in. Their blood rebuilt Europe. Their hands fought battles, their courage filled coffers, and yet they received nothing in return. Widows received form letters. Children grew up learning stories of bravery and betrayal. Decades passed. Most veterans died without justice. One memo stands out. A single line, brutal in its clarity: African troops are not eligible for equal compensation. Not because of service, not because of merit, not because of courage, because of race. Men who stormed beaches, cleared minefields, carried comrades through fire, were robbed not on the battlefield but by bureaucracy. This wasn't oversight, it was strategy. A continent fought for freedom while being denied its own. An old man sits alone on a cracked bench, bent back, hands trembling, eyes clouded with decades of memory. Once he stormed beaches, marched across deserts, fought battles that reshaped the world. Now the medals feel heavier than the memories. Some governments have offered token payments, a small lump sum, a late apology. A gesture meant to close a wound that never healed. But how do you compensate a stolen lifetime? How do you repay fathers who couldn't feed their children? Dreams that never happened. Homes never rebuilt. Lives forever altered by a war they survived but were never rewarded for. History barely mentions them. School lessons skip their names. Statues stand elsewhere, commemorating others while they fade into whispers. Yet imagine this: without African troops, entire campaigns might have failed. Without their courage, the world might look very different today. Their blood watered European soil. Their sweat built cities they would never see. And still, the recognition is missing. Their legacy lives in whispers, in unmarked graves, in grandchildren who never knew why their grandparents struggled so. Some wars end with treaties, paper signed, hands shaken, parades, fireworks. History books neatly closed. Other wars end with silence. No headlines, no medals, no names remembered. The African soldiers of World War II, they didn't just fight an enemy across oceans. They fought erasure. They held the line when the world wanted to look away. They carried rifles, courage, and the weight of a continent on their backs. And yet, history forgot them. But remembering is power. Every name we speak aloud, every story we uncover, every medal we finally place where it belongs, it challenges the systems that buried them. They didn't just defend freedom. They exposed its limits. They showed the cracks in promises made by those who wielded power. And maybe the real battle isn't behind us. Maybe it's right now, to remember, to question, to demand better, because they didn't just change their time, they changed ours. And the question hangs, heavy and silent. Have we finally paid the debt we owe, or are we still turning away from the courage that reshaped the world?